Hi, this is Mr. Villamore, and welcome. Today's objectives is to eliminate a parameter and write a set of parametric equations in terms of x and y. The agenda for today is we're going to start with the warm-up, do some notes, and then practice. For our warm-up, we're going to review solving basic equation. So for example, number one, we have x equals 3 minus 2t. Since we are solving for t, that means I need to isolate my t on one side. My first step is I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. And this becomes x minus 3 equals 3 minus 3 becomes 0. And then we have negative 2t on the right side. Now, since I'm solving for t, we're going to divide both sides by negative 2. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 becomes positive 1, and your t is equal to x minus 3 over negative 2. And that's my answer. Next one, x equals t squared plus 4. I'm isolating t squared, so I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides first. So left side will have x minus 4 equals t squared, and since 4 minus 4 is 0, so that becomes 0. So solving for t, I'm gonna take the square root of both sides, so this canceled out. So my t is going to be equal to the square root of x minus 4. Now we're going to be using this skill so that we can eliminate a parameter given the parametric equations. Remember when we are given parametric equations and we are asked to graph it? So parametric equation, just a quick review, can be used to model projectile motion. So if you'll still remember this scenario that we have, so we are given two equations here, which we are called parametric equation. We got f of t equals 40 times t, and g of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus 48t plus 64. We're able to graph it wherein the x is going to be your 40 times t is describing how far the object horizontally is given a certain amount of time. And then for the g of t, which is going to be your y, is describing how high is the object given a certain amount of time. So we're able to graph that, if you can remember. Now, if we are given a parametric equation, remember, let's just keep in mind that x represent the horizontal distance. So it's the horizontal distance. Like I said, it's how far the object goes, and the y represent the vertical distance. Pardon my handwriting. I'm just starting to get get used to this kind of scenario while teaching. Okay, so x represents horizontal distance, the y represents the vertical distance of an object given a particular time. Now we're looking at most equations, we're relating x in terms of y. So there's another way to graph the given parametric equation. One way or one technique is to graph parametric equations by eliminating the parameter. When we say eliminating the parameter, parameter is our eliminating the parameter is our t. So by eliminating the parameter, so we can get started with the given x equation, which is the horizontal distance, and solve for t. So that's the plan. Let's solve for t and then plug in the t in our second equation. So if your first equation is x equals 1 minus 2t, so we are using what we reviewed earlier in our warm-up, which is solving for t. So right here, I can subtract 1 on both sides. And the left side will have x minus 1, which is equal to 1 minus 1 is 0, and then negative 2t on the right side. Dividing by negative 2 on both sides to solve for t, that means my t is going to be equal to x minus 1 over negative 2. So that is my value of your t. So once you already have the value of your t, you can go ahead and plug this in to the variable t of your other equation. Your other equation is y equals 2 minus t. So this t right here will be replaced by the t that you solved earlier from the x equation, from the horizontal distance, from that equation. So let's replace the t by this, by x minus 1 over negative 2. I'm going to replace that. So y equals 2 minus x minus 1 over negative 2. While we can still simplify this further, I'm gonna stop from here. So my y is equal to 2 minus x minus 1 over negative 2. We can simplify this further by multiplying each term of the equation by negative 2 and simplify it from there. Now let's do another example. I have a note here, just solve for t in the x component and substitute the value for t in the y component. So let's do that. So if your x is equal to t squared minus 2, let's solve for t and then plug in the t in our y component. So x equals t squared minus 2, that's squared. Solving for t, I'm going to add 2 on both sides. So this side will give me x plus 2, the left side, equals t squared. And since negative 2 plus 2 is 0, so that gives us 0. So solving for t, I'm going to square root both sides. And my t is going to be equal to the square root of x plus 2. Now, once I solve for t, my next step is to substitute for t in the y component. My y component is equal to 3 times t. And since my t right here is equal to this, I'm just going to replace that with whatever my t from the x component. So y is equal to 3 times the square root of x plus 2. So that's going to be my equation. Y equals 3 times the square root of x plus 2. Or you can also do it, you can have it as y equals 3 times square root of x plus 2. They're just going to be the same thing. Now go ahead and pause the video and try numbers 1 and 2. All right, hopefully you pause the video and let's see, you have x equals 2t squared minus 1. Solving for t, I'm going to add 1 on both sides first. So I will have x plus 1 equals 2t squared, and since negative 1 plus 1 is equal to 0, so that gives us 0. Solving for t, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Will give me t squared on the right side equals x plus 1 over 2 on the right side. And solving for t, I'm going to get the square root of both sides, and my t will be equal to the square root of x plus 1 over 2. And since I already solved for t, now I'm going to substitute the value of that t to my y component. Since my y component is equal to t, all I need to do is to replace that t with the value of my t from my x component. So which is same thing as square root of x plus 1 over 2. For number 2, you have x equals 2 minus 3t. Let me just rewrite it here. 2 minus 3t. Solving for t, I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides first. And then I will have x minus 2 on the left side equals 2 minus 2 is 0. So you can just drop it off. And then negative 3t on the right side. Divide both sides by negative 3. Negative 3. So negative 3 divided by negative 3 is positive 1. So my t is left alone. I isolated my t. So t is equal to x minus 2 over negative 3. Now, since I solved for t already, I am going to plug in the value of my t to my y component. So my y component is equal to y equals 5 plus t. So since my t is equal to x minus 2 over negative 3, so replacing that, so I have y equals 5 plus x minus 2 over negative 3. And then again, you can simplify this further, but I'm going to stop here since it's going to give us the same answer. Go ahead, pause the video again and try to work out problems 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then check your answer by playing the video again. So for the first one, x is equal to t squared. I'm solving for t, so I'm just gonna get the square root of both sides, and it will give me t is equal to the square root of x. Since my t is equal to the square root of x, I'm gonna plug that into my y component. So y is equal to 2 times the square root of x. Number 2, x equals the square root of t minus 1. Since I'm solving for t, the plan is to get rid of the square root first. So I'm going to raise both sides to 2 so that I can cancel this out. So I will have x squared equals canceling my square root. So I have t minus 1. And then solving for t, I'm going to add 1 on both sides. I will have x squared plus 1 equals t. So that's going to be my t. And then once I solve that, again, I'm going to plug that into my y component. Y component is equal to y equals 2 times x squared plus 1 plus 3. So y is equal to, I'm going to distribute 2 times, this is simple equation, so you can simplify further. So we will have 2x squared plus 2 plus 3. So my y will be equal to 2x squared plus 5. All right, next, this kind of problem, this is ordered pair, so the cube root of t comma 2t squared, so meaning this is going to be my x comma y. So my x will be equal to the cube root of t, and my y is going to be equal to 2t squared. So solving for t from my x component, I will raise this to the third power so that I can cancel this out. So we have x cubed equals t, and my t is x cubed. Using that, plugging into my y component, my y is equal to 2 raised to times x to the third power raised to the second power. So my y is equal to 2x to the 6. I'll be running out of time, so I'm just going to write the answer here. My y is equal to 2x minus 12. Hopefully you got this correctly. All right, now go ahead and try to make sure you practice it if you want to keep practicing. Practice the same problems, and then you can